Hello and welcome to Crowdfunder's very first masterclass on how to raise 30 grand in 30 days. My name is Dawn Bebe and I'm co-CEO and founder of Crowdfunder. I'm here tonight with my fellow co-founder, Phil Geraghty, who's going to be sharing his huge knowledge of crowdfunding with us. Very shortly, we'll be revealing the secrets of how to turbocharge your crowdfunder. But first, it's absolutely fantastic to see so many of you here. We're thrilled to say that at the last count, there were over 900 of you signed up and tuned in to watch this. So before we go on, it'd be really fantastic if you could introduce yourself in the chat. That should be in the toolbar down here, the little speech bubble, telling us who you are, where you're from, and perhaps how much you'd like to raise for your crowdfunder. And the reason for that is so we can tailor some of this webinar more towards the sort of audiences who are watching. So have a go and say hello. So this webinar is absolutely packed with useful stuff for you if you're going to be raising money. It's the first time we've ever revealed what things will make a difference between raising a small amount and an absolutely huge amount. And I can promise you, I hope, that it's not going to be one of those dull, turgid webinars where you switch your camera off, fall asleep at your desk. We've all been to a few of those through the pandemic. No, I can promise you that we'll be revealing the absolute inside track on the 5 things that will supercharge your fundraise. We'll be throwing in polls in the chat box, and there'll be a chance to ask questions at our Q&A at the end. So stay tuned. You'll also find loads of resources in the toolbar at the bottom on the resources tab. And that's the real benefit of joining us live. If you click on the resources bit, you'll be able to see some of the examples we're talking about. Talking of live, this is a live session. So if you do drop out to get a bit confused and you want to find your way back, just go back to the original Zoom link that we sent you, or just message us rather, and we'll loop you back in. If all else fails, we'll also be sending this recording out so you can rewatch or share with friends together with a short survey. So enough of the housekeeping. I'm delighted tonight to be joined by one of the people who made Crowdfunder possible. Please say hello to Phil Geraghty. Phil is not only a pleasure to work with, he's a bit of a Yoda. He's helped more projects raise huge amounts than you can shake a stick at. So Phil, how are you? Have you ever seen such a big audience? Looks like people are really keen to know your secrets.
Hey Dawn, thanks so much for that intro. Yeah, 900 people. That's quite a crowd. So
yeah, we're a bit scared, aren't we? We're a bit scared. So come on, Phil. Tell us, what is the biggest project you've ever raised money for? Come on.
Oh, there's been so many. It's really interesting which ones stick in your mind. I suppose there's probably 2 that I'd bring focus to for different reasons, and I think one is. During the beginning of lockdown, when we had 4 doctors come onto the platform to raise money for PPE for the NHS because they weren't getting it from the government. It was a really interesting time, hopefully never to be repeated. But they put up a project, raised about 60 grand in the first day, then went on to, it got picked up. They got a 20 grand pledge from a Mr. J McAvoy, who we thought might be the Hollywood superstar James McAvoy. It turns out we had a Zoom call with him. It turns out it was him. And on the Zoom call, he put in another 200 grand into the project. And that project went on. He then did one show with LBC Radio the next day, the whole gubbins, and they went on to raise 2.4 million over the course of about 3 or 4 days. So that just, I think that just shows at the top end of what's really possible with something like that. And the other one that springs to mind is one we did last year with Ed Sheeran. Ed Sheeran did a prize draw for an intimate gig in the Union Chapel in North London, and it was for mental health. He volunteered to do it, and I got to go along, and it was one of those nights where we got to experience what it's really like to be on the receiving end of the crowdfunding. I was there with 750 people who had won tickets through the crowdfunder. Everyone had gone through that route, and you got to see the kind of impact it was having. Disney, if anyone's seen the Ed Sheeran Disney biopic, it's in that. It's the gig that's in that. So it was quite a special night that was all crowdfunded. So those are 2 kind of standout ones for me.
And you've been a little bit busy during the election, haven't you, Phil? What did we raise for the election? What did we do?
It's quite election time. It's always an interesting time on Crowdfunder. It's a busy time, but I think everyone was expecting the November election. We ended up with a election this side of the summer, and we've had 800 candidates crowdfunded with us, which we think is about 1 in 5 candidates that actually stood for the election, which is quite amazing. They raised just over £1 million.
£1 million, wasn't it?
In the 6 weeks of the election campaign. So that was fantastic to see. And lots of, in amongst that is lots of great people doing great stuff in communities across the UK. So that's always nice.
Absolutely amazing. Opening up democracy. We've been opening up democracy in the last few weeks. Brilliant. So Phil, this webinar, why have we set this up, and what are we talking about tonight? What's this all for?
Well, I think I get the lucky job of speaking to lots and lots of different projects from across the spectrum: charities, businesses, social enterprises, sports clubs, individuals. We found, I suppose, from speaking to them, that there's some things that the successful ones do very well, and there's some things that the projects need to learn to do better. And we're always looking for opportunities to bring people together, so we can just highlight some of those things that we know are gonna, if projects really concentrate on, because there's a lot to concentrate in running your cause, running your enterprise. If they can really concentrate on these things, we think they'll reap rewards. So those are the bits that we really wanted to highlight today and bring to the fore.
Brilliant. Okay, so before we get to your killer tips on how to raise a big amount, it might be quite useful, Phil, for you to just kind of take us through the basics so everyone's on the same page, so we know what we're doing, and then we'll move on to the more advanced elements. So I think you've got some slides, have you? Bring those up.
Just a few, not too many to
not too many.
Everyone busy, but yeah, just a few. We get those up. I think the key thing for me is that we started Crowdfunder to really help people fund the change they want to see in their communities. That's why we exist, and it's an absolute pleasure working with people like yourselves attending tonight that are in your communities doing great stuff, wanting to make change, and doing that in very different ways. Like I said, we know some of you are charities, some of you are social enterprises, businesses, individuals. We don't really care what type of organization you are. What we really care about is the project that you're doing and the impact that that's going to have on communities. And that's why we exist. You're all out there tackling society's challenges in different ways and making ideas happen. And we really appreciate the work that you all do at the level you're doing it. And I think one of the things that we've seen time and time again is to really support the great work you're doing, you need the funding. The funding is the bit that can really unlock it and make it fly, and can sometimes be the barrier to the next step of what you want to do. And so that's why we get quite passionate about what we're doing, because we really want to see you succeed. And if you're succeeding, we're succeeding, and that's a good thing. So we've got a few things. I'm just going to rattle through a few slides quickly just to give you a very high level overview. But if we look at the numbers that have kind of so far been raised on Crowdfunder by projects like yourselves. So I checked this top number actually just before we came on. It's rolled over. It's now on 390 million. That's how fast they move. They're constantly moving these numbers. So 390 million raised so far for all projects across the UK. We're getting kind of 300 projects a day. When we first started the site, I think we had 2 projects come on in that first week. We're now 300 projects a day. It's quite buoyant. There's a lot going on, lots of different stuff, as you'll see on the site. And we've distributed so far £32 million of extra funding, of match funding that's gone on to projects. So as people pledge to your project, some of those projects are being matched by our partners. We'll come on to that a little bit later, but there's great opportunity there. But those numbers are constantly ticking over, and that's testament to all the hard work that everyone's doing at a local level. So if we look at the different ways that you can actually crowdfund, and different ways you can fundraise on Crowdfunder, there's kind of six basic types. You can do a straight donation campaign, and you can raise funds that way. People come on, give you money. More and more so, we're seeing people use rewards as a way of upping the amount that people give, and I'll come on to that a little bit more, but that's where someone gets something back in return for their donation. Prize draws are very exciting. I mentioned the Ed Sheeran one. We've got a few other examples later. Very exciting new way that people are raising money. And extra funding is a great thing to look at. You can all see that on the site and see what extra funding is available. We have millions of pounds of extra funding available at any time. You can accept regular donations on Crowdfunder, and you can have people fundraise for you as well. So there's lots of ways of looking at that. If we look at the rewards-based crowdfunding, I can give you an example of that. And this is a great project that's setting up a bike park in Burlish. And what I love about rewards is there's really three things you need to understand about rewards. One is we're really trying to encourage people to give more. So if the average donation across the site is about £42.50, but most people will be giving in the kind of £10 to £20 bracket, and then you'll get some higher donations, which brings that average to 42. So I personally love rewards that are in the kind of £50, £75, £100 bracket, because it's making people give more and moving them up. And it's like, well, I was going to donate £20, but for £50 I get a mountain bike coaching session. So I'm going to move to that one. The other thing you're hoping is that more people will convert. So it's lovely when you see people come in and they were going to give £10 or £20, but they're moved to actually give because they're moving that budget out from donation. You know, you'll have a certain amount, every donor will have a certain amount they want to give away on donations, but if you can move me to suddenly that's coming out of my entertainment budget or my family day out budget, then that's a different way of actually engaging with a donor. So having varied rewards on there can work really well. And it also gives you some great talking points across the campaign. So we've seen that time and time again where you're looking, the art of crowdfunding sometimes is to talk about your project in different ways over 30 days. We're going to talk a lot about the 30 days, but I want to talk to people in different ways about the same project in 30 days. And rewards gives you a great way of doing that because you can focus in on those and promote those. If we look at the project page as a whole, you know, a lot of you would have seen project, but you would have all seen a crowdfunding project page, but there's some really key points to put out on here. And one is that, you know, we're looking at now on a desktop view, but 70–80% of people will be viewing this on a mobile device. And that means that the top of the page becomes very, very important. The title becomes really important. The short description, the amount you're going for become really important. And the project page really is a way of you describing what is the challenge, what is the problem that you are solving. If that's what your donors want to know, is what is the problem that you are solving as an organization? And by donating to this campaign, how are we helping to solve that? And can you bring me on board with that? So those are the things that we pull out on the page and look at. Is really the text in the page, the image, the videos, and the amount that you're going to raise. Target is always a really interesting question. How much can I raise? You know, it's often the last thing we look at. So once you've done all the other work and look at that, you have to have a realistic look at what could be raised. But we usually say, what is the smallest amount of money that you can actually do something with? Go for that, because you can always burst through that target. It's much better to get a success under your belt and then burst up from there. So that's the project page. And if we look at a prize draw example, you know, there's a couple that I pulled out here, and one is, you know, Glastonbury, fantastic. Glastonbury Festival ran this prize draw this year, raised £1.3 million for charity. We've given away 20 sets of tickets. And I think one of the joys of that campaign is one of the reasons for the success of that campaign is they have direct access to their audience. They have a very exciting prize, and the timing of it was right. We'll talk about timing a bit later, but the timing of it was perfect, and that the tickets are being sold, the event's coming up soon, and people are going to enter that and go for it. You know, if you look at that from maybe how a smaller organisation is using prize draws, there's this great organisation called Patchwork, which help women who've been victims of domestic abuse. They run a prize draw every single month on Crowdfunder. It's fantastic. They're raising between 7 and 12 grand every single month for their prize draw. They've got a selection of prizes that have been given to the organisation, and they're giving those out every month. So although we're talking about £30,000 in 30 days, sometimes that's not the right thing to do. And sometimes you can spread that fundraising over the whole year. And we're finding with prize draws that people can come back again and again. So if we go to the next slide, all I want to say on this really is there's so much support available online for these types of things. If you want to know more details about any of those aspects we've just shown there, there's support right across the site and all these things. You can sign up for stuff and have a look at it, and then you can take it from there. So if we go back to Dawn.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So thanks, Phil. Hopefully that's a really useful introduction. I can see in the chat lots of people are new to this. So for some people this will all be new, but it's a really good introduction for all the basics, what you need to think about if you're going to crowdfund. And for others, it looks like it's more of a reminder for what they need to do if they're going to crowdfund again, because we have lots of people who repeat crowdfund with us. And I think probably it's really useful, even for those who have crowdfunded with us. We have some really great new functionality on the platform that they may not be aware of. So, for example, you can run prize draws, which Glastonbury raised £1 million with their prize draw, but we know there's lots of football clubs who do prize draws every month, and also extra funding, which is match funding, so people can double their money through crowdfunding. And I think those things are some of the things that we might dive more deeply into on our next webinar. But for now, I think we'll kind of move on. I think I can sense from our audience that people are keen to dive into the more expert advice on how they can raise more. So Phil, do you want to talk us through your 5 big tips on how to raise 30 grand in 30 days? What's your first big tip?
Thanks, Dawn, certainly. So like I said, we see common patterns amongst projects and things that we advise a lot, and we've tried to pull those together into 5 top tips. The first one of those, my first top tip, is really about you are always building your crowd, and you should always be looking to build your crowd. So the biggest mistake I see often with projects is they think, I can just launch a crowdfunding project. I'm just going to get this magically funded. I've never spoken to anyone about this idea. No one knows about it whatsoever, and I don't have any contact with anyone. And off they go. That's the extreme end. But what we see with the best, most successful projects is they've been warming up to this for a while. So they've been building that crowd to move towards a crowdfund for some time. So to put that in context, you see organisations like the Belmont Community Cinema, which are live now. They're live, they're based in Aberdeen. Cinema's closed down. They want to reopen it and make it available for the community. They've been doing a range of things. So they're obviously doing stuff on social media, growing their Instagram and their Facebook and the like, but also doing live local events. So they've been putting on cinema shows in other venues to promote the fact that the cinema is closed and they need it, showing demand for it. So it's a really good idea. But then doing all that stuff in the run up to a crowdfund, which they've raised £30,000 now, on their way to more. I think that for me is a great example of how you're thinking about growing your crowd the whole time. And that crowd could be people who are going to potentially donate, but it could also be partners that you want to bring into the campaign to actually help you promote it. And that's the one thing I'd say as well, is that often if an organisation is from the outset is thinking, well, I don't have anybody, how do I even start at this? Finding some partner that's got a aligned mission with yours that can help promote you and help what you do, give access to their audience, include you in a newsletter, put you out on their socials, is a great way of just reaching people and starting to build that crowd and making your first steps in that direction. So that's my top tip number 1, is always be building your crowd. Okay,
so build your crowd early, think about it from a long way in advance. And if you don't have a crowd, try and build on someone else's, I guess. Try and partner with someone.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Okay, so tip number 2?
I think tip number 2, so my tip number 2 is launch the right project. So this again is where a lot of our conversations go with early stage projects, is like, well, we want to do crowdfunding. We need the funding. What's actually the one thing within our organization that is the most crowdfundable? How do we pick out that thing that we can put in front of people that is the most crowdfundable thing? So often that is a mixture of, have you done fundraising before and how's that worked and where the gaps might be? What do you actually need funding for? So there's a reality of like, we need funding for these things. But there's a trick in that, and in terms of how you describe that to people and how you put that forward to make sure it's the thing that people actually want to fund, the donors want to fund. And a lot of the times I will be saying to projects to go away and have that conversation with potential donors. So be talking to them about the sort of things that need funding, what sort of things would they be interested in funding, and that gives you a really good insight into how you position your project to move forward with it. There's also the 6 different ways we spoke about earlier, and whether you want to do a donations campaign, a rewards campaign, or a prize draw campaign. And again, that can fit into what have you done previously and which is the right one to do. We see a lot of projects who have done maybe a big donation ask, and audiences can get a bit weary of big donation asks if you're going out to them constantly. Prize draws can be a good antidote to that, where you come in with something a little bit different and something they can engage with. So we're seeing people do, a donation or rewards campaign every 6 months or so, but in between that, doing prize draws every month or every couple of months as a way of kind of continuing that fundraising journey over the whole year. Ipswich Town Football Club's foundation is a good example of that, where they're running prize draws every couple of months, occasionally doing donation-based crowdfunds as well, and it's perfect for that because they've got an inbuilt crowd of their supporters who are after shirts and stuff from the club, and it just works really well. So that's my top tip number 2 is launch the right project and really think about what type of project you actually want to run with.
So it sounds like you need to crowdfund for something quite specific, so not be too vague about stuff. And what about if really what you're doing is crowdfunding to cover, say, for example, staff costs or running costs? Because people often get really anxious about that. What would you sort of recommend? How do you position that, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think definitely I've seen it a number of times where it is the reality that the staff costs and the core costs need to be covered of the project. What we try and do is really focus in on what's the benefit, what's the end benefit to the community of this happening, and therefore focusing on those bits. Those are the bits that are more fundable. But I think we're seeing one of the shifts we've seen in crowdfunding over the years is people are very aware that there are core costs. They're very aware that there's staff costs. It's part and parcel of making all these things happen. So people are happy. We've had a few projects where they've actually crowdfunded the cost totally. So they said, we want to hire we had one for a human rights organization who wanted to hire an in-house lawyer to work with refugees. They said, look, we need to hire it. It's going to be 40 grand. Let's raise it. And they raised it. And I think that was really nice for me to see that you can go straight for the jugular on the core costs. But I think, yeah, and your other point around, what was your first part of your question, Dawn?
Being specific. Being
specific. It was, I think, the more specific you can be, the better, definitely. But again, you're specific about what you want to do with this money and what you want the impact to be, but you can then talk about the wider picture of the other things that need to be covered, the other things that can then impact the project.
So it sounds like if you're transparent and upfront about what you want to do with the money, that's also helpful. So if it is to fund some staff, just be honest with people and say part of this money will go towards that or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I would really urge people to do as well is test that messaging with people in conversation. So the more you can speak to potential donors and the rest of the team as well around kind of like, well, I want to position it like this. We want to raise money for this. Do people actually understand what you're saying? Because a lot of times it can be quite internal jargon as well. So it's like, do people actually understand what this is and understand what the benefit is, and keep perfecting that the whole time.
Okay, I think we've got that. So tip number 3.
So my top tip number 3 is launch at the right time. So once we've launched the right project, we need to launch it at the right time. And there's a few elements to that as well. Again, the biggest mistake I see projects making is saying, I've got this great project. I'm going to launch it next Friday. And on Saturday, I'm away on holiday for 3 weeks. It drives me mad. The thing is, you're going to be there promoting this project and pushing this project for the duration of it. We'll talk about the planning in a bit, but you're going to be doing that. You need to be on the ball. The team needs to be on the ball, and you need to be pushing it for that duration. So it's really focusing on that. Like, when is that timing good for you? You need to be around. You need to be focused on it. Not too busy with other stuff as well. So again, if you've got a natural busy part of the year for yourselves, it's not necessarily always the best time for doing that. When is good for your donors as well. So looking at kind of when are your donors likely to be around and likely to be engaging with you. If you've got a very seasonal organization, it's picking those peak seasons to say, actually, we want people, we want the spotlight on us. And the third bit is what's going on in the outside world. So is there elements of news focus on certain issues that can bring another wave of people to this project that wouldn't necessarily be doing it? We've seen some great projects do that. We had one with Turquoise Mountain, who did great work in Afghanistan, and they had run a few projects with us. But obviously, when the fall of Kabul happened, there was an urgency, they launched a project. They raised 360 grand in 3 days over the weekend.
Wow.
Which was way ahead of what they'd done on their other projects. And that came from the media focus on the issue. So when you do have those bits, it's quite nice on sometimes for the urgency to be able to flip something up quite quickly. If you do have that focus on you, if you've got coverage in any kind of media, is to be able to move to funding quite quickly. And that's what sites like Crowdfunder are there to do, is to allow you to set these up very, very quickly and get running with them if you need to. So that's my top tip number 3, is that launch at the right time.
Think about timing. Okay, clear your diary. Think about timing. Okay, tip number 4.
So top tip number 4 is to have a plan. So go into this with a plan, and at its most basic level is a 30-day plan. It's what are we going to do for the next 30 days to fund this thing. That'll be a mixture of, we're going to email these people, we're going to put this out on social media, we're going to hold this event, partner A is doing this, partner B is doing that, and we're going to spread the word over those 30 days. The plan has several benefits, but the main one I find is the biggest mistake I see projects doing is you fire all your guns on day one, you've emailed everyone, you've blasted out on social media, and then gone, we've only raised 10% of what we're going to do, and then you're really on the back foot. So what you need, if you've got a plan and you know this is going to be an activity over 30 days, you've got these things, when you get those moments, and you will get moments where you go, what are we doing? What's working? What do we do next? You go back to the plan and go, we haven't, invariably, we haven't done that, we haven't done that, we haven't done that yet. And you realize there's some gears to go through. It's lovely if you can fund the project in 3 days, like I spoke about with Turquoise Mountain, but the reality is sometimes it takes a bit longer, and it's nice to have that plan to go back to and go, these are the steps that we can go through, and this is what we're doing. That plan also is a way of involving the whole team and making this not just about one person. But again, one of the mistakes we see as an organization will go, right, you're doing the crowdfunding, good luck, see you later. Whereas that person should be going back and going, okay, right, we are a team, we're all involved in this in different ways. And like, how can we access different things and make this bigger by working together as a team? And the skills you're often looking for across that team, obviously digital marketing is a great one to have. Anyone who can make videos is a great one to have. Anyone who's good at presenting, writing, storytelling is a great one to have. But like the key one, I'd say, if you've got someone in the organization who's a good connector of people, someone who knows everyone, who knows the industry, who knows the local contacts, those people are worth their weight in gold. If you can get them on board with the project and get them to open doors for you, then that's where the real magic can happen. So yeah, that's tip number 4 is have a plan.
Brilliant. Yeah. That's the tip for life, isn't it? I remember when I've done a few crowdfunding projects, not as big as yours, Phil, but I do remember feeling quite overwhelmed at the beginning, thinking, oh my God, there's so much to do. And somebody just said to me, all you've got to do is do one thing a day. And I thought, oh yeah, actually break it down. It is doable. You can do it. So yeah. But it works.
That's true. The other thing as well is just learning what works for you and works. There's a great tool inside Crowdfunder where you can create trackable links for various activities. So you can create links and put those links on Instagram, create different links, put those links on LinkedIn, different link for emails, etc. And then it allows you to see what donations are coming in from those different sources. So it's a great way of learning what's working and what's not working, and then leaning into the bit that works. So it's a great way of doing it. So yeah, that's top tip number 4.
Okay. Next tip, big tip.
So top tip number 5 is control the momentum. So what again, the biggest mistake I see in this area is a project. I saw it the other day where a project gets great press coverage. There's a link to the project page. I go through to it and it's on £0 from 0 supporters. It drives me mad every single time. And I think the thing to do is that's in your control. You can control that, and you've got to understand that people want to see the momentum of the project. They want to see it moving. And so you and your core team and those people closest to the project can get the ball rolling on that project. You can put money into that project. You can support it. You can send it out to core supporters first. See, we often look at it like an onion. It's like going out to the core supporters first, and then the wider and the wider. And by the time that someone who doesn't know you sees it, you're already a long way funded. And they're going, what is this thing? It's clearly supported, it's clearly successful. I'm going to get involved as well. But if someone hits that page and it's on £0 from 0 backers, they're just going to bounce off. So, you know, you want to grow that audience, and it gives people that kind of trust and belief that it's going to succeed, and it gives it that authenticity that it's real. You know, those things are really important. So, you know, do that, control the momentum of the project. If you've got people that you know are going to give money to the project, which is always a good thing to have lined up in your plan, stagger them. You can have some at the beginning, but you can have some on day 10, some on day 20. So again, you're moving that, and you've got different stories to talk about on the way. I mean, that project's constantly moving forward towards the goal. So that's tip number 5, control that momentum.
Brilliant. So I think we've got a summary slide coming up, so to kind of just crystallize that. But I do remember when I did my crowdfunds, somebody said to me, what you need is get your friends and family to pledge first, get about 10% pledge, and then do all the comms, do all your social media, get the press release out, and so on, because then you've validated it, you know, with your closest community have supported you. So that worked for us. So yeah. Okay, so do you want to just summarize those, Phil, just for people?
So those was tip number 1 was always be building a crowd. Tip number 2 is launch that right project. Is it donations? Is it a prize draw? Tip number 3 is launch at the right time for you, time for your donors. Number 4, have a plan. You know, have a plan for the whole team, and make sure the team's involved in that planning as well, and the execution of it. And number 5 is really to control the momentum of the project, get off zero as quickly as possible, and then fly from there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. Those are really good tips. And having done a few crowdfunds myself, I know they definitely work. So I think I'm right in saying that if you want more advice and more tips, it's all available on Crowdfunder in our Knowledge Hub. So if you go to Crowdfunder, at the bottom of the homepage, you'll find the Knowledge Hub, and there's loads more stuff in there that you can sort of research and kind of think through your plan. So you can build on what Phil's saying and get more of the details. So that's really good. So we're going to change gear a little bit, and we're going to open up the floor and move on to our Q&A. I'm going to bring Zoe, one of our brilliant coaches, onto the screen. I'm kind of hoping, Zoe, you know how to do that, because I don't. We've set aside around 15 minutes for questions. So if you pop them in the chat box, and Zoe will look out for them. And if we don't manage to get your question in during the next 15 minutes, check out our help centre on Crowdfunder, and maybe some of the answers will be there. Or when we email you afterwards, we'll give you a contact for Phil and the team. So if you want to talk directly to Phil or one of his other coaches, he can get back to you. So, but for now, just chuck a few questions in the chat box, and we will do our best to answer them. So have we got any questions in, Zoe?
We've had some great questions coming in, and not only that, we've had some wonderful collaboration. So we've got actual attendees answering other attendees' questions. We've got a forming of crowdfunder support where people want to join together and help each other through this process. So really embracing what we champion, which is collaboration with your crowd, which is really exciting. And we've had a great question in from Andrea asking about, is there an optimum time frame to run a crowdfunding campaign? In terms of duration, how long should a crowdfunder be?
So it does vary from project to project, and some of those elements we looked at, like your time, donors' time, deadlines coming up. 6 weeks is for me personally a lovely sweet spot of long enough to get the ball rolling and get going. You might be able to have a few breaks in the middle, but not too long that it goes on forever. We do have a lot of functionality on Crowdfunder to be able to extend projects as well. So you can start off with a timeline of 6 weeks. You can extend your project and extend it further timelines. So we often say keep it quite short at the beginning. Don't go too long, so you've got that urgency and deadline. But then you can always extend it when you get closer to the deadline for 2 reasons. One is it's going so fantastically well, you're over target, people keep donating, then let's go more. But also if you're not hit target yet, it's a way of just saying, look, we got a bit longer. The lovely guys at Crowdfunder have given us a little bit longer. Please come in and donate. But yeah, 6 weeks is always a nice place to start.
Brilliant, thank you. We've had another question in here from Gloria asking about social media. So they don't necessarily have a large social media following. How vital is that for a successful crowdfunding campaign?
I think the key thing for me is some direct access to your potential donors. So social media is the obvious one. and it's a great one. But also if you've got a physical venue or you do physical events, that can work really well. We've seen projects funded in a night. I remember seeing a ceramic studio that raised 15 grand in a night from an event they held, and people just donated on a laptop in the corner. You know, you can do that, but also email as well, email lists. You know, everyone forgets about email in the day of social media, but email's still the biggest driver of donations to the site. So that's a key one to look out for.
Amazing. Okay, we've had a few questions coming in about match funding, quite kind of involved questions. One thing I would kind of point or signpost people towards, as you mentioned, Dawn, our main site where we have a whole wealth of knowledge about extra funding. For those in the room that aren't clued up on extra funding, as Phil mentioned at the top of the session, we work and partner with different organisations to be able to distribute match funding. So if your project is eligible, you could see a bit of a boost towards your fundraising by way of one of our partner pledges. So that could well be of use to many of you that are with us this evening. We've got lots of not-for-profit organisations doing wonderful things throughout their communities. So definitely go and take a look at that one. Phil, this might be a good one for you. You talked about the importance of having people around you to do this effectively. We've had a few people commenting in the chat box that for them it would be a solo venture. What would your advice be to people trying to do this on their own?
It is doable, and we've seen it done, you know, many times. I think, you know, if they're doing it on their own, they're probably used to doing stuff on their own in terms of the business or the enterprise or the cause. You know, they're used to pushing it. They're used to doing many different aspects. It is possible. If you can find anybody else to help out, even on a voluntary basis, even having someone to just bat ideas off, or, you know, in those moments of like, well, what do we do next? It's nice just to have somebody there to be able to talk through these things with. Maybe find someone who's done something similar. The other thing we see quite a lot as well is, obviously we've funded something like 80,000 different projects on the site. So there will be a project on the site who has done something similar to you. There's pretty much nothing left. It's very rare we see something completely new. So either something similar to you or something in a similar location. It's always worth reaching out to them as well and just saying, how did you do that? How did that work? We find that projects like this wonderful chat going on here, projects are always really happy to talk to each other and offer advice to each other. So I think it's doing that. I wouldn't be put off doing it by the fact that you're doing it by yourself. You know, go for it. But the more people you can bring in, I find the easier that's going to be for you.
Brilliant. We've had a few questions as well coming in about the risk factor. So what happens if people don't reach a target? Will they lose all of that money that they've raised?
Yeah, so there's two options on Crowdfunder. Most people select the keep what you raise, which means no matter whatever your target, you're going to keep that money. So most projects are set like that. You can, if you want, set the project to all or nothing, which means I have to hit my target. We usually only see that where people are buying a local asset. So if you're buying a pub or buying something, you definitely need 300 grand. Otherwise, there's no point collecting the money. But for most organizations running, any money you raise is going to be good and go towards it. And we know it's part of a funding mix. There's going to be funding coming from other places, like the cinema I spoke about, the Belmont Community Cinema. They've got grants from the local council. They're applying for other grants. The crowdfunding is part of that mix. So it's about mixing those things up the whole time.
Amazing, thank you. I guess just on that as well, we've been joined by people all around the world this evening, which is amazing.
Wow.
Is there any kind of prerequisites or requirements to be able to use Crowdfunder UK in order to raise money for a project?
You do need a UK bank account, is what I'd say. So that's the real restriction, is having a UK bank account that the money can go into. So most of the projects are UK focused. We have a lot of charities that are raising funds for stuff abroad as well, so development in other countries. So that's not unusual, but the money was always flowing into a UK organisation or individual through their bank account.
Brilliant, thank you. And that's actually covered all of the questions that we've had through this evening. We do have a few more moments, so if anybody would like to pop another question into the chat box, we can definitely loop back round to that one. Dawn, did you have anything to add to any of the questions that have come up this evening?
Yeah, I think one thing that perhaps it's really worth the audience here looking out for is that extra funding. We have a number of partners, Aviva, British Airways, lots of local authorities. And at any one time, we've probably got about £10 million worth of match funding available on the site. And it's actually fairly easy to apply for that match funding through when you sign up and create your project. And projects can really easily double their money, or get a 10 grand pledge. Loads of examples of that. And it's much easier than a grant funding application form. And also, it's probably worth saying it's a lot quicker. So Phil talked about 6 weeks. You could have that that big grant pledge within 6 weeks if you play your cards right. So I think it's really worth, if you're thinking about crowdfunding on Crowdfund, it's really worth looking at our extra funding tab and exploring the different funding available and having a little think about whether you could be eligible, because that could really turbocharge your crowdfunding. There's countless examples of projects that have literally doubled the money they wanted to raise through that. So I think that's really worth mentioning. Zoe, I know you do a lot of work on extra funding, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I supported a lot of projects through kind of that application process and onto success. And it's amazing what can be achieved in a short amount of time. And it can hugely boost not only the money that they're raising, but also awareness around what they're doing. And showing that support from a match funder can really help to gain traction for future funding bids that they might put in, future grants that they might write as well. So, or apply for. A great question that has come through. In terms of a live project, somebody has a live project at the moment and it's lost traction. It's been live for a little while. It's gone a bit quiet. They're wondering, is there any advice you could give to actually build that momentum back up, or are they better off closing that project and going again?
I think it can happen, that, and I think there are definite tactics to put into place. So, sort of things you can do. You can edit a lot of the page copy itself as you go through the campaigns. You can change the imagery. You can change the video. If you don't have a video, I would do a video and put that in. You can change the text a little bit. I would speak to people who have donated and say, like, well, why did you, and how do you think we could reach more people? You can do an update to those backers. So you can do an update to those backers that says, it's great, we've got to this stage, but I really need your help to share it out wider. Can you all go find me another donor to get involved with the campaign? You can add new rewards. If you don't have rewards, you can add them. If you can add new rewards mid-campaign as well. So you can go like, now we've got this. Again, like I said, different ways to talk about a campaign every single day. It's the same thing, but I'm talking about it in a different way. Those are just some off the top of my head, but there's quite a few gears you can go through to really kind of just get that momentum going, and it's totally possible. And you do find as well sometimes the closer you get to the end as well, more people will come forward. I've seen it a number of times where you got people going, well, I'm going to come in at the end with a number, but I want to see where you're at first, and then I might help to kind of close the gap at the end. So they're just kind of waiting in the wings. It's never reassuring when you're mid-project. You kind of want the money on, but that does happen a number of times. But yeah, speak to the donors and communicate with them and see if you can get them working for you as well.
Thanks.
So I'd just like to jump in and say, I think you should sort of expect to hit a lull. I think the shape of a crowdfund is it takes off like a rocket. It's like really, really fast. Then you hit treacle time. It's like, oh no, I've run out of momentum. And then you kind of refresh and you think, what should we do? And you come up with loads of great ideas and boom, it takes off again. And I think you should not be dismayed by when you hit treacle time. Just look at it as a challenge. What else can you do? What else can you do? And it works. I mean, some of our biggest projects, even Save Our Stables, which was the really big one down in Twickenham, where she raised over £1 million. Even she hit treacle at one point. So it's to be expected. And like Phil says, get a plan, have lots of ideas, put it into a plan and keep going. Believe in yourself and it'll happen. So there's one more thing I thought perhaps we should mention is regular donations, shouldn't we? So I think I'll let Phil talk about it, but crowdfunding can be a great way to get people donating to you regularly. Phil, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so all projects have the ability to basically add on regular donations as well. So you can, as well as taking a one-off donation, donors will be invited to give to you an ongoing basis afterwards. So if you're running a campaign for 30 days, it's nice to be able to obviously get the money in from that campaign, but then see a steady stream of funding coming in over the course of the year. which is fantastic. So that's live at the moment. We got some more developments coming out on that as well over the coming weeks and months. So watch this space.
And yeah, more and more projects, especially charities and so on, as social enterprises, are using that as a way to literally use us as their fundraising platform, getting money in regularly and doing regular fundraisers. So yeah, it's really good. I think we've hit the quarter of an hour, and I think it's probably time to wrap up. So it's been a really brilliant session. I hope everyone's found it interesting. I hope you've learned some stuff. I hope you've sort of feeling a bit more inspired maybe about getting started with your crowdfund. Zoe, what happens now?
What happens now, Dawn, is we say a massive thank you for everybody that's come to this session tonight. It's been amazing to have so much conversation going on in the chat. There are some questions as well that have popped in last minute. We will look back through this and make sure that we can contact you with any follow-up advice if needed. Please do keep an eye on your inboxes. We will be sending out the recording of this session along with any resources that we think would be beneficial for you to start your crowdfunding journey, along with a survey as well to let us know how we're doing and how we can help support you in your potential crowdfunding journeys.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zoe. So look out for that email and definitely let us know what you think of tonight. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it boring? Did you fall asleep? Thank you so much for joining us, and do stay in touch. We can't wait to see your project on the platform. And if we see you, we'll definitely be trying to help you raise that money. So the very, very best of luck with the ideas you're trying to make happen. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.